Tomorrow is Christmas, so an early happy holidays to everybody listening on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, SiriusXM Channel 204, watching on VSiN.com. But also, of course, Christmas and the NBA go hand in hand. So we go out to our phone lines, bring in Jake Brown, NBA writer for SNY. You can find him on Twitter at Jake Brown Radio. Jake, thanks for the time, especially on Christmas Eve. Appreciate it. So let's go to tomorrow. And this came down, I want to say, about looks like 45 minutes ago or so. The Houston Rockets will be unlikely to have Chris Paul on the floor against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Rockets have been beat up a little bit, and I think it's really played into this two-game slide for Houston. But when you watch the Rockets in these last two games, why do you think that they've gone on this mini slide? Is it the injuries, or are you seeing something maybe like a chink in the armor with the Rockets?
It is the injuries. I mean, this team is kind of nothing without Chris Paul. They're not the team that we've seen all season without him. James Harden needs him. I mean, you see there's just so much of a load on him to do well and to score 50 a game. And even when he does score 50, they still will lose. So he kind of needs his right-hand man, and he doesn't have it. Eric Gordon's not the guy. Ryan Anderson is extremely inconsistent, and they just don't have the depth to win without him. I think with Chris Paul, this is a team that could take the Warriors 7 games in the playoffs, but without him, they're nothing. So they really need to get him healthy. I don't think it matters if he plays on Christmas. It doesn't matter if he plays right now. They're going to be the 1 or 2 seed. No matter what. But in the long run, if Chris Paul is not on the floor, the Rockets aren't what they hoped they'd be when they made that trade.
Hey, Jake, how about OKC? A lot of hype around the acquisitions of Paul George and Carmelo from the Knicks, but it hasn't worked out really offensively for OKC to this point. What do you see in the Thunder here in late December, about 2 months into this thing?
Well, it hasn't worked out. I think this team has finally started to come around a little bit. You're seeing it lately. They won the last couple of games, but this team needed time to get chemistry going. And when you have to cut shots from Carmelo Anthony, who's known for taking 30 shots, when you got to cut shots from Paul George, who's known for taking 30 shots, and I'd say you have to cut shots from Westbrook, although he doesn't want to cut them. It's going to be difficult, and I think it's taking time. I think they're starting to gel a little bit. I'm not going to get too hyped for them beating the Hawks on a buzzer beater. But still, I think finally they're starting to gel a bit. And I think this team will be up there in the top 4 in the West. I don't think they're better than the Rockets or Warriors, but I think they're finally starting to gel, which is enjoyable to watch, because this team, I mean, there's so many expectations this team has. And early in the season, it's difficult to watch. And you saw it against here in New York last week against the Knicks. The Knicks were playing without Porzingis, and they made it look easy against the Thunder. So I think this team, again, is still going to take a little bit more time, some growing pains. But finally, at least in the last week or two, they're looking like the team that they should look like.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think, like you said, it's such a long season. OKC, it could still come together for that team, no question about it. And it is hard to get too hyped over a win over the Hawks, JVT. Yeah. But that game tomorrow.
They need another They need another shooter, too, right, guys. I mean, Andre Roberson, you give him a layup, and there will be no defender in the same area code as this guy. I mean, if they don't want to cover him, so they need a shooting guard. And I think you might look for them to maybe make a trade and get another perimeter guy. As much as they have those 3 scores, they need to get someone else, because they have a couple of offensive liabilities out there, like Roberson, that when you leave him open, he will shoot the ball over the backboard. So they need to get maybe another guy before the trade deadline, which is actually earlier than usual this season.
How dare you?
That's a good call there. I agree with that, too. The Rockets 2.5-point favorites in OKC tomorrow, one of 5 Christmas Day games. That's the number at the South Point. Rockets -2.5. How about the game in New York, Jake? And are we going to see Joel Embiid on the floor? And how about this Knicks team, which I feel like has played pretty well here into late December, with even while dealing with some injuries, on again, off again, with the Unicorn, Porzingis, and Tim Hardaway Jr. out of the lineup. Knicks 2.5-point favorites over the Sixers at the Garden tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it looks like Embiid is going to play, which is not good news for the Knicks. But, yeah, the Knicks have surprised a lot of us here in New York, and I'm shocked, honestly, by how good they've been. It's honestly, for the Knicks, been must-watch TV every night, especially when Porzingis does play, because this team will come out and beat the Celtics, and then the next night they'll go out and lose to the Pistons on the road. It's been a home and road kind of 2 different seasons between them, 15-5 at home, 2-10 on the road. They got 29 road games left. They got 13 of the next 17 on the road. They have a lot of road woes coming up, and this will make or break their season. Up until Martin Luther King Day, we'll find out if the Knicks are for real or they're pretenders. They need to show us that they can win outside the state of New York. One of those 2 road wins is in Brooklyn, which is essentially a home game. So the Knicks have won 1 game outside the state of New York this season out of their 17 wins. Until they can win on the road, I don't know how seriously I could take them. But they have definitely surprised a lot of us. And the key is staying healthy. When Porzingis is not in there, they're not good. When Cantor missed 3 games, they lost all 3. Without Hardaway, they're missing an essential scorer who's lived up so far to that $71 million contract. They need his 3-point shooting. Since he's been out, they just cannot make as many threes as they used to. So they have a lot in Tim Hardaway that they're missing. And once he comes back and if Porzingis can stay on the floor, we'll see. But again, until they win on the road, I don't know how to evaluate the Knicks. But I guess right now they are a playoff team.
Well, Jake, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have MVP Beasley, so I think they're going to be fine for the future, right?
I love Michael Beasley. I mean, he's great. The issue is, again, that I didn't mention before, is Jeff Hornacek is not a good coach. And I've said it over and over. He does not make good in-game adjustments. Michael Beasley scores 32 points on Thursday night. The next night, he plays 13 minutes. I mean, Beasley was not seen on the floor, and the final possessions is not on the court. I mean, he's Mr. Automatic. I know he's cocky and he's inconsistent, and you have some pains with him defensively, but Michael Beasley has to be on the court when you need a bucket because he is Mr. Automatic if he gets it. As crazy as it sounds, he has to be out there. So Jeff Hornacek has done a poor job with rotations and making in-game adjustments with this team, and that's so pivotal with this team, how many injuries they've had, and when Porzingis has been inconsistent, as the other night when he had 1 point, you have to make adjustments. So as much as we joke about Beasley, the guy can light up the scoreboard and has to be out there late in games and fourth quarters.
Jake Brown with us, NBA writer for SNY. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake Brown Radio. So, Jake, before we get to the big contest, the Cleveland and Golden State, late night, Minnesota taking on the Lakers. I like the Lakers in the spot, and I wanted to get your opinion on LA because when I watch, these last 4 games, it's been a murderer's row for them, but I've kind of been impressed with how they've performed in some of these games. Obviously, the upsets of Houston and then Cleveland, a very close game there. So what are you looking at in terms of the Lakers? Because I think the one thing that sticks out to me with them is defense, and I think Walton's done a great job of coaching them and kind of bringing that Golden State mentality of, switching almost everything, and they kind of have the personnel to do it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that it's a new hero every night. Kyle Kuzma has showed us that this kid is a stud. You guys know about him out on the West Coast, and he just lights it up one night, and then Lonzo Ball starts making shots with the goofy delivery another night, and then Brandon Ingram some nights will show up. So while they have played defense, they've lit up the scoreboard, easily getting over 100 almost every night lately. They're fun to watch, and you never know who's going to be the next hero. And as much as the Lonzo mania took over, the guy is really showing us, when he makes shots, he's a very good all-around player. We know he can light up the rebounding and assist sheet, but now that he's scoring a little bit, it's given them such a big boost. So the Lakers, you're going to deal with the youth and the mistakes, but if you're a Laker fan, you got to be happy where this team is going and what they're building, and they've been fun to watch every night, and that's all you can ask. They gave the Warriors 2 heck of a 2 games. Obviously, they lost both, but overtime, and coming back from a 20-point deficit the other night. So it's been a fun team to watch. They're not a playoff team, obviously. Anyone who thinks that is out of their minds. But in a year or two, they could be a real competitor here.
Yeah, I agree. Lakers, you can still get 4.5 with them.
Yep.
The final game on Christmas night, the South Point Sportsbooks got 4.5 on that. And the T-Wolves, Jake, how about the development here with Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins? You've obviously got Jimmy Butler. High expectations coming into the season, I think, for this team in the Western Conference. Tom Thibodeau continues to play his main guys a lot of minutes. I don't think this team's matured defensively like we thought it was going to, but the T-Wolves still in pretty good standing in the Western Conference. And like we said with the OKC Thunder, it's a long season. I could still see it coming together for the Thunder. But where do you how do you assess this team in December?
I like this team. They're top 5 in the West right now. They have so much youth, and sure, they might not be able to play defense, but they're scoring at will. You got 2 20-plus point per game guys in that Jimmy Butler trade that they obviously robbed the Bulls with. Karl Anthony Towns is developing. He's a double-double monster. Andrew Wiggins is developing. Jeff Teague was an underrated addition in the offseason for them. So they have, really good starting 5, and Taj Gibson And they're obviously in such a tough Western Conference, but I mean, how could you not like where this team's headed? They're a couple of bench players away from being a real legit contender in another year or two, and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins from being a contender. And Karl Anthony Towns is also a high character guy. He's great off the court. He's great with the media, and he's going to continue to grow. Talking with him at All-Star Weekend last year, you love everything about him. He's actually a local guy here in North Jersey, and he's going to be a good leader for this team, and they need that. And I think the coaching's there with Thibodeau. How could you not like what the Timberwolves are doing? Everyone thought that they would take the next step this year, and I'd say a 20-13 top 5 in the West start here in the first half is a pretty good sign of that.
You know, the least attractive matchup, at least in my opinion, on the schedule for tomorrow is Boston taking on Washington. I lean a little bit towards the Celtics in this spot. They're a 4.5-point favorite at home against the Wizards. They were in a mini slump, I guess, 4-5 going into the game last night against the Bulls, but they torched Chicago, get the win there. So it looks like maybe they're turning it around. Injuries, just like the Rockets, Jake, have kind of played into it. You know, Jaylen Brown missed a game. You have what's going on with Morris, all of that stuff. But with Boston, when you see this team defensively, they're a top-tier team. Do you see anything in these 10 games where they're 5-5 that makes you worry? Or is it, again, kind of like Houston where you see some injuries and you think this is going to even out? They played a lot of games, too.
I think it's going to even out. The weird thing about the Celtics, and when I was watching Knicks Celtics the other night, they have half of their guys. I mean, 5 of their players you have never heard of. You don't know where they came from. You don't know what country they're from. You don't know how to pronounce their name. Yet these guys are coming off the bench and they've been effective. The Celtics are the best team in the East, which is scary, as I said, with that roster. But it's been the Kyrie Irving show. I mean, that trade turned out to be an absolute, I wouldn't say steal, but right now, since Isaiah Thomas hasn't played, I mean, it's been incredible that Kyrie Irving ended up in the Celtics' lap, and now they need to get healthy. I think with their weird bench, as I said, they need their actual bench players to get back. And who knows at this point, will Gordon Hayward come back for the playoff run? If they get him back, the Cavs got to be careful because the Celtics will be a legit championship contender if they get Gordon Hayward healthy for maybe a June NBA Finals or maybe hopefully a conference finals. I wouldn't take too much stock into a 10-game middle of the season stretch of them going 5-5. I just think Kyrie Irving is so good, and as long as he's on the floor, they'll go as he goes. So if he's there, they'll win.
So on the other side, the Washington Wizards, and Jake Brown with us, a radio host, NBA reporter for SNY. The Wizards, you know, it's weird. So they beat just the snot out of the Orlando Magic, and really not a great, in terms of a badge of honor, not really awesome to beat up on the Magic, who have just been atrocious since their 8-4 start. But the Wizards, it's weird. They're now 9-9 against teams with losing records. So they're kind of a team that I have yet to figure out. Have you been able to put your finger on what the Washington Wizards actually are?
No, I haven't. I mean, they're so weird. I think they have more talent than their record, but there's been a couple injuries. John Wall's missed like a dozen games, so that's been an issue. I think now they might play well that he gave the whole team a bunch of Rolexes. I mean, what a present that was. Those did not look cheap. Obviously, a little bit of a publicity marketing stunt, I'm sure, and he wanted to make himself look good, but hey, it's all good. He's doing for his teammates. I think they're not an elite team. I think they're a middle of the pack team, and they're playing a little bit worse than that right now. I cannot really read. I'm having trouble talking about it because you can't read the Wizards. I mean, they have that dynamic backcourt, and they just have not lived up to the hype. I think Bradley Beal has lived up to his contract a little bit, but the other guys aren't doing much. The Wizards are a middle of the road Eastern Conference team. They'll probably end up as the 4 seed, and they'll be behind the Raptors, who people are absolutely sleeping on. And everyone thought the Wizards would be above the Raptors, but I think we got to take a good look at the Raptors as a team that can make the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're going to take the spot of what we thought the Wizards would do, honestly.
All right. I believe in the Raptors, actually. And the Celtics, I believe in the Celtics as well. Charles Barkley not buying into the Celtics, Jake. He said that the other night. Of course, he didn't know how many 30-point games Kyrie Irving had.
That was awesome.
He gets 3 when it was 11. But are you buying into the Celtics? Do you believe they can give the Cavs, as the teams currently are constructed, do you think they can give the Cavs a run in the Eastern Conference Finals? Because that was not the case last season.
Yeah, I don't put much stock in anything Charles Barkley says. He does it for ratings and entertainment. He's not the brightest guy. He hasn't looked at a box score since probably he played. So anything he says, I just kind of ignore. But I think the Celtics are a team you have to take a look at. I think as long as they're healthy, and I think they do maybe have to make a trade because, as I said, some of these guys on the bench you haven't heard of, they've been nice. They've been serviceable role players, but they're not championship caliber players. So I think they might need to take a look and maybe get a veteran off the bench, maybe a veteran swingman off the bench, and they need to get healthy. But why can't you put the Celtics in that conversation? I think the Cavs have had times where they've been inconsistent. Sure, they've come around, but they've dealt with injuries. Will Isaiah Thomas come back from that hip and be good? Who knows? So with Kyrie Irving there and playing the way he has, I think the Celtics have got to be trusted as a team that could go to the finals. Probably not beat the Warriors, but they're one or two additions and some guys coming back healthy away from definitely being a team that could take down the Cavs. They almost did it last year, and now you have Kyrie Irving. So yep. I think people should show some respect to the Celtics, and I guess even with that good record, people still aren't giving them much respect, guys.
All right, in the late games on Christmas night, the road teams are the favorites. Rockets laying 2.5 at OKC. T-Wolves laying 4.5 in LA against the Lakers. In the three early games, the home teams are favored. Knicks laying 2.5 to the Sixers. We talked about the Celtics as 4.5-point favorites over the Wizards. And the last game at noon, 3:05 Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time, Cavs and Warriors. Warriors 5-point home favorites. Jake, and Warriors off a home loss last night, upset by the Nuggets. No Stephen Curry. What do you expect to see on Christmas Day between the Cavs and the Warriors?
I think it loses so much of his luster with Curry out, obviously, and you can't really put full judgment into this game as you would last year or the other Christmas when they play. I think the Warriors go when Curry comes back. I don't really care about the record right now because it's irrelevant to me. They need this guy on the court. They're just such a different team. I mean, they miss Draymond Green and they have Curry. I put stock into them because I think Curry's just so much more important than a lot of these guys. And he's your point guard. He's your distributor. And having a guy like Livingston come off the bench for a start makes a huge difference. So, I don't put as much stock in this game. I'm not as excited. I sound like depressed talking about this game, but I just think it's not the same feel to it without Curry on the court. So I think the Cavs end up winning them all.
Speaking of missing point guards, Jake, Isaiah Thomas is still on the mend, and the reports are that he might come back, at the beginning of the 2018 year. So what do you think he adds to this team? Because the thing that interests me with Isaiah Thomas is offensively he's solid, but it's the defense that you worry about, especially with a team like the Cavaliers. You mentioned inconsistent. I mean, when they're inconsistent, it's their defense that is not good.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know he's small and he's not the greatest defender, but I think this team desperately needs Isaiah Thomas on the floor. I don't think you don't want LeBron playing point guard every night. You don't want Derrick Rose out there, and you don't want to see a ton of Jose Calderon, which they've been forced to see. And Jose Calderon's coming into the season, he was a nice third-string point guard for them. But now that he's starting, you're like, come on, this is
like 6 shots a
Calderon
game
from the mouth. Yeah, I mean, you can't have Calderon out there that much. I think just having the name Isaiah Thomas and the body of Isaiah Thomas and the ability of Isaiah Thomas back on the floor for the Cavs will make a huge difference and maybe elevate them to beat the Celtics. And I think Isaiah Thomas is motivated. We've seen it on Twitter. He's constantly fired off tweets. He says, sources IT will be back this time, blah, blah, blah. So I think he's itching to get back on the floor, and I think he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder because, he's mad at the Celtics. And if these two teams take off in the East Finals again, he was pissed at Danny Ainge, and he'll treat every one of those every one of those Celtics defenders as you'll paint their heads with Danny Ainge like you're at a shooting range, and he's going to go right at all five of them. So I'd expect him to play with a chip on his shoulder, and I think he's going to add a much-needed boost for the Cavs here.
Jake Brown, you find him over at SNY, NBA reporter over there and radio host at Jake Brown Radio on Twitter. Jake, thanks for the time. Enjoy the holidays and the games tomorrow.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.